You guys recently announced I guess, a partnership with Akash, and from my understanding, a lot of the 3D rendering in Passage is being done on the Akash network. Can you explain,
Yeah,
how,
this is
you're working
wild.
with Akash and how it's better than you're using centralized servers or other sort of computational resources?
Yep, absolutely. So one of the decisions we made from the outset, right? It's really wild how little we have compromised on immersion or accessibility. I mean, in some ways, this is just as accessible or more accessible than like YouTube, Google Meet. It's one click and you're in, right? I mean, it is dead simple. Um, and then immersion, we have the best possible graphics. Now, you go and look at something like the games, Strange Clan, Wawa, like they can be more stylized, more cartoony. But then you look at some of the environments like DeFi Dojo, and it can be extremely realistic, all within the same game engine. So no compromises there. Well, you have to compromise somewhere, right? And the compromise for us has been, one, our sanity in building out this wild system, but then two, cost, right? It is more computationally expensive to host these experiences than anything else, right? I mean, I remember when I used to think, when we were first doing Passage, I used to think that the video hosting was expensive, like doing the whole webcams. But then we were still rendering everything in the browser. So your computer was bearing the computational cost, not us. That was early on in Passage when we were launching, our event with Amazon, for instance. But that doesn't even, the computational resources of video feeds doesn't even, shake a finger at the computation of 3D worlds, right? I mean, we're talking each user on Passage occupies about half of a GPU. Now, these can be anywhere from like commercial, for those who care, commercial GPUs to high-end GPUs. So like we have a good range of cost depending on, we'll basically have, right now it's all one tier of GPU that you're getting when you jump into Passage. But eventually we'll probably have like tier 1 and tier 2 worlds, some worlds that require a little more GPU power to run, so that people can get the most out of the hardware. But so it's not like the most expensive GPUs that we're using for Passage, but you're still occupying half a GPU, which, and for anybody who hosts a website or whatever, like, that like maybe you use a couple CPU threads for your website for the whole month for all your visitors, right?
Yeah.
The computational demand of Passages is big, right? Imagine you got to use half of this big glowing monster for every single person. You need one of these for every two people who are going to be in an event. So that said, it can be expensive to run. Now, our belief was basically that, and this was 4 years ago that we started building this. So our belief was that it's okay to compromise on price. That can be the compromise because this is the one thing that will change fastest, right? And I think we've been affirmed in that. People's UX journey is not going to be expedited. It's going to be slow, and people are not going to adopt a new user experience quickly. But the price of hardware will adapt quickly, and it has. I mean, I believe we've seen as much as a 60% drop in GPU costs from the time that we were building this in 2020. So we've worked with both GCP, Google Cloud, as well as AWS, right? We've used a bunch of different cloud solutions. Passage is cloud agnostic. We can leverage any architecture. But point being, we've seen the best and the worst pricing in cloud compute. And it's gotten way better since 2020. Because again, there's been a lot of push for GPU infrastructure for AI and for all sorts of different applications. That said, it's still relatively more expensive than any other kind of hosting. So this is where Akash comes in. Akash is the first really open market for GPUs, right? I mean, in terms of people offering GPUs for real world product use, you've got Azure, Google Cloud, AWS. That's it. 3 people. Right? There's like 3 people competing with each other. And so it's a little bit of a rigged market, right? You can't really call this an open market. But what Akash does is it allows anybody all over the world to contribute GPU compute to their decentralized cloud marketplace, and anybody can buy it. And the relationship between provider and the person leasing the hardware is governed by smart contracts, right? So the beauty of that is there's censorship resistance. There's a bit of security just in terms of infrastructure. It's actually more reliable in a lot of ways than AWS. AWS has been down at times when Akash wasn't. So the uptime's better. But then there's a lot of advantages to Akash, but the biggest advantage of having an open marketplace is true price discovery, right? The cost of a GPU, the same GPU on Akash versus AWS is, up to 10 times cheaper. And for us personally, we've seen cost reductions integrating Akash of 70 up to 70% for the GPUs that we're using. And there are GPUs you can get on Akash that you just cannot get on AWS because there's so little availability, and you've got to go through a whole a permissioned process to get approved to get these GPUs, all that nonsense. With Akash, in 1 day, in 1 hour, you can have your developer, get your AKT and set up your lease, and you have access, instant access to hardware that isn't even available anywhere else, but for a price that's 10 times cheaper. So that's wild. That's super wild. And we've been using that. So we've been putting more and more of our systems onto Akash. And
how's that been? Like, what's the integration experience? I know you're not sort of, on the technical side, but
right.
How easy is it to integrate with Akash and leverage those resources for what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I would say easy, right? Okay, it's becoming easier and easier depending on your use case because there's more people building tools for leveraging Akash compute. So, you can go and launch a WordPress website in Akash in just a few clicks using some of their native tools built by teams like CloudMos, right? So it can be stupid easy. Now, I am biased because we have some really smart developers. Our CTO is brilliant, and so we're definitely skewed on the side of being high level developers. So, for just your kind of average run of the mill full stack dev, there might be a learning curve. You've got to be able to work with Kubernetes. There's some containerization stuff you have to understand. But the beauty about Akash is it's built for scale, right? Now that does make it, in some sense, a little bit more complicated than it could be. But for people who have big enterprise applications, it's perfect. There's so much really, really good architecture built into the Akash network. So, yeah, I would say any barrier that's there for your kind of run-of-the-mill full-stack dev is a good one, right? It's one that's going to create sustainability and scalability. So, yeah, I would say overall dev experience is phenomenal. The community is phenomenal. There's a huge open source community building around Akash. Everything on Akash is open source. So really, really easy to contribute to development. A lot of people building tools for Akash. So, jump in the Discord and you'll get your questions answered stat. Really, really great community building around that. So that really helps developer adoption.
Cool. It's a great use case, I think, also for Akash to, Akash, I think, has made this sort of pivot into the GPU marketplace vertical. We had Greg on several months ago where we talked about this. You can go back and listen to that episode if you're interested.
Yes, he's brilliant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is just another use case, I think, that demonstrates just how powerful Akash is as a marketplace for compute.
Oh, yeah.
Not only for use cases outside of crypto, but use cases in crypto as well.
We did a booth takeover of the Akash booth at ETH Denver. And it was so easy to sell people on this, right? So we're talking to people about Akash, and they're like, oh, you're from Akash? Like, no, I'm from Passage, and we're saving 70% on our GPU bill. Boom, sold, right? Like, it's just wild in terms of anybody who understands the need for GPU resources can immediately see the value proposition. So it's an easy sell, and we love having those conversations because it's been huge for us. And we're just trying to move more and more of our services, our infrastructure stack over to Akash. So right now we have a little Akash button in the dashboard where you can launch an event on Akash versus AWS. And it's my favorite feature so far because it's kind of like the instantly save money button.